This would be the question to ask as you're sitting on your couch, is in the presence of the despair and the anxiety that you might be feeling in this moment, can you find the hope?
Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted amazing clarity in your life, then do we have the 2020 Year of Reckoning show for you. Today I'll be talking with Dr. Michael Lennox, psychologist, dream expert, creator of the Daily Astro Alert, and astrologer and prognosticator. We had him on the show in December, and now everything he said is coming true. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about what in the world is happening today astrologically, what it means for all of us, and what in the world we should do and not do from here on out. In other words, do we need to duck and cover? So welcome back to the show, Michael. Are you ready to shine?
I am, Michael. Of course I'm ready to shine. With you anytime.
Woohoo! Well, I said it before the show, and I will say it now. I blame you.
I must confess, watching the world go mad, there's just a tiny part of me that's delighted because it fits the astrology to a T.
Which is why I needed you back, because I am a believer, and we talked about this, a year of reckoning, a year of clarity, but also a year, if we pull everything out from under the carpet, there are positive possibilities. People need to hear about that now because we need to bring light to the apparent darkness. So first off, what is going on astrologically? Where in the world are we?
It's really interesting to me what I left out of my yearly forecast, right? So in December, you're one of the places where I did this, forecasting for the year. I did all my preparation, and one of the things that was big in the year was something interacting, two planets connecting with the nodes of the moon in the month of March. What month is it now, Michael?
Might be March.
It might be March. I left this out of my forecast because it was too abstract. Part of it was just editing for time. Like there's just so much you can talk about in an interview, right? But truly, when I looked at this set of cycles of the planet Chiron, the wounded healer who works in wound, so illness and wound are Chiron's domain, and Uranus, the great awakener, were both making contact with the nodes of the moon during the month of March in two very different and powerful ways that were going to change the arc of how we operate through the collective consciousness. It was just something that I looked at like, what am I going to say about that in December, about March to come? I just left it out. I figured we'd figure it out when we got there. Had no idea how profound March would be. So we should probably start with a conversation about the collective consciousness and what that is.
I would love to, because as I've been sharing with people, we as a collective have a choice. We can choose to collectively dream up a nightmare, or we can collectively dream up a higher electron state, which I'm guessing is what you're calling changing the arc.
Yes, absolutely. And Uranus is the great awakener responsible for the wokeness of the planet. So Uranus participating in this does speak to the opportunity to up-level, to have a higher expression of consciousness as a result of moving through this very difficult experience. Those of us who choose to will wake up to higher levels of functioning or higher levels of consciousness at any rate as a result. And certainly anybody who is tuning into this podcast is interested in having a higher consciousness experience. And this is one of those moments on the planet where the demand to attend to the collective stuff has just never been greater. And that reckoning, that Saturnian reckoning that the year is about, part of it is the responsibility to hold a higher ground energetically in consciousness as the world does go mad. Some of us have to be holding the the idea that there's something powerful and beautiful and expansive happening while we all fall apart through I love your language, the reimagining or the birthing of a new paradigm, because that's what we're in.
Exactly. And I used to call people who are attracted to this show light workers. Because if you're attracted to the energy of yourself, you're attracted to the energy of me, that's what you are. But now I'm calling us light warriors because it is our job during this time. It is go time to bring light to the darkness if this is going to make a collective shift to the positive. So I'm going to throw out a big A word here that a guest brought on the show last night, Matt Kahn. Love him very dearly. He didn't have the gloom and doom meaning behind it, but he did throw around the A word. Is this Armageddon, astrologically the end times?
No, I don't believe in Armageddon. I don't believe in a reset event or an end time event. Partly because of this, Michael. One thing that I appreciate as a studier of consciousness, one thing I've come to learn is that in the fundamental bumping up against incompatible elements, we have our ecstasy, bliss, and consciousness itself. You don't get the digital world without ones and zeros. You don't get a new life without an egg and a sperm, right? There's no similitude in those two things. There's no spermness in egg and there's no eggness in sperm. But when they come crashing together, we have consciousness itself. That's what the system does. Like the system, meaning the solar system, the system of consciousness, our individual participation in the collective. What it does is it holds this tension of opposites constantly, and that's what we are. The tension of opposites from the sun, the father god, and the earth, the mother goddess, coming together in this dynamic, that's life itself, and that's tension. And intensity and a constant sense of, oh my God, the system is just pulling on itself and each other. That's what we are. So that's what we will continue to have. The fantasy of an Armageddon says this tension will one day explode and become one explosion. I don't believe that we can have an Armageddon because we're designed to do this, and we will continue to do this.
Hopefully at a higher level.
Yeah, the level is absolutely changing. So let's just take a moment to describe the nodes of the moon energetically, archetypally. Like, what are they? They are vectors of energy that fly off of the orbit of the moon and its power, its energy, as it crosses paths with the orbit of the Earth. So it's about the Earth and the, that movement of orbit and the moon, wrapping around us, and where they cross each other, it's like this forward vector of energy we call the north node of the moon, and a backwards vector of energy called the south node of the moon. They're not points, they're just energetic directions. They move in a 19-year cycle, which is also the same number of years in the cycle of how eclipses work. And interestingly, when the sun is in alignment with one of these nodes, that's when the eclipses occur. So the nodes of the moon in astrology are probably the singular most direct description of what we call a collective consciousness. So if I'm writing my daily astro alert and the moon or a planet is touching the nodes, my language will be, we are out and about making connections in the world, because the nodes of the moon are about the world and its collective operations. So to have slow-moving planets hit the nodes of the moon tells us that the collective is changing directions. And in this case, it's the powerful healing energy of Chiron, the wounded healer who takes, he brings us to healed spaces, but only by trekking through the wound. So about a week ago, Chiron squared the nodes of the moon. That's a really difficult geometry with a power of healing that needs a sort of a dive into illness and a rise up out of that place into a more healed space. Like that planet aggressively hit our collective consciousness in clunky geometry. A pandemic is a perfect chironic wounded healer experience that's hitting the collective like a punch, like a square, like a conflict and an obstacle. Then a week later, this happens like tomorrow, Uranus hits the nose in more, the geometry is more pleasant, but it's Uranus, the lightning flash, like, holy moly, I didn't see that coming. Oh my God, anything can happen and probably will. So these two energies hitting the nodes of the moon in the month of March 2020 says everything we thought we knew about the collective consciousness, the direction of the future that we're moving into, where we're all in alignment, pushing this mechanism together in a collective way, is changing right in front of our eyes. And here we are, we're in it. Then that led me to think about, well, what's a virus? How does a virus consciousness fit into the idea of what is the collective?
It's interesting when you talk about a virus, because I see two viruses right now. There is the virus that is coronavirus, and I definitely want to talk about that corona and eclipses here in a little bit. But there is also the virus of fear, of collective consciousness, and that's the bigger virus I see at play.
Okay. There's a third virus.
Yes.
Of kindness and care.
That's where
happening.
you and I come
in. A lot of that as well. So let's just throw that in there. A lot of people are responding very beautifully, and sharing and teaching and inspiring others. And I certainly see a lot of that. So when I think of the collective consciousness, the first place that I go to is with my psychologist hat on, right? Jung especially was the thinker, the great psychological thinker that introduced us the idea that there is a collective consciousness, that there's just a realm that we all participate in, that we all share. And in that realm, that's where archetypes live and dreams occur and astrology applies, and zeitgeist energy and race mind thought and collective fears and all of those things are part of the collective consciousness. And a virus is part of the collective. It lives in this world that is connected to all beings on the planet, right? So in that regard, it's a collective consciousness. It's not biological, right? So it's not wet and mushy the way we are wet and mushy, and yet it can enter our wetness and our mushiness, and it enters everybody democratically. Right? It knows no difference between, where you come from or who you identify as and all that. So a virus is a perfect expression of the collective, of something that happens in, through, and as the collective. So in a month where, astrologically speaking, great planetary movement is addressing that nodal path, that capacity to join together in a collective movement energy, we're being changed. The direction is being altered. And none of us are really going to know what that means until some time has passed. But we will all be able to look back at the early spring of 2020 as the moment that happened on the planet.
Thank you. I see, I call it Mother Earth, but astrologically, I'm not sure what name to give it. I see humanity I'll see Mother Earth as hitting the red button on the conveyor belt of humanity. She said, all right, guys, time out, pa-dunk, and hit that button. What does that mean? Why are we being ground to a halt right now?
Well, if we lean into the archetypal meaning behind the planetary transits of 2020, yes, the message is so that we might change that which is not serving the collective more profoundly, right? We got to go back to the planetary energies that are prominent this year, which is Pluto in Capricorn, Saturn in Capricorn, coming together in a once every 50 years they come together, and once every 500 years in this sign. That's the last time they were in Capricorn together, bringing utter change. Pluto changes things down to the cellular level, and Saturn says we must do the right thing, if you will, and allow for things to change dramatically. And so that's the collective response that we're having right now is in response to the changes that we're being asked to go through that are so major and so enormous. In some ways, the virus is like a kind of like, oh, you think you're not going to change things? Yes, you are, because we're going to bring this reckoning thing that's going to force everybody to democratically approach change and transformation from the same place, at the same level, to some extent that, a virus is democratic in that regard.
I never go on Google during an interview. I want to be fully with you. However, I just did. And there was something that went pinged off of my consciousness. And I went 500 years ago. And somewhere here it is. I'm not going to pronounce this right. Kutlahwak, Aztec ruler of Tenochtitlan, dies from smallpox.
Oh, wow. Which
Plague.
Was the agent of change that allowed colonization to decimate First Nations peoples. That's interesting. I did not know that. When I look back 500 years, I look at the Reformation and the coming of Protestantism and the polarization that began back then when some people came along and said, no, God looks like this. Oh, no, God looks like that. And the Western, I love adding to that. And that was the year when the Western colonizers began to decimate the First Nations populations with illness.
It's fascinating, this repetition, this coming back around of 500 years. So I know we're going to go into 2008 again in a minute. Before I do that, I want to dive more into Saturn and Pluto, because we talked about them last time, and we talked about the teacher and death coming together. Oh my God, I didn't think we were going to be meaning that literally. What do the two of these guys going on together have to do with anything? And then let's throw just a little amplifier of Jupiter in here.
Okay, so if you look at the trajectory of Pluto and Capricorn and then sort of Saturn catching up, and the conjunction of these two planets that hit in January, all of the life events in the current social climate and the political landscape was heating up all at the same time in December, January. Right. So it's not just the virus emerging and moving around the planet in December, January. That was the height of the impeachment in the United States, Brexit in the UK. There were fires in Australia, but there was just so much happening on the planet that peaked in January, which is when the awareness of the virus also began to peak. So now here we are a few months after the January rise up of the wave. And one could say that since that big rising up of the conjunction of Saturn and Pluto was exact in January, and they're not going to meet up again. That's it. They're not going to retrograde back together. That's one big wave, like taking an enormous pebble the size of a planet and dumping it into a still pond the size of more than that and making a huge wave. That was January. So the death and reckoning that rose up then is kind of diminishing now. Even now, and even as the months of this year progress, those two heavy hitters will not return into the same territory again. But Jupiter will. Jupiter, the planet that only brings bounty, beneficence, yummy, expansion, abundance, and prosperity, also brings just largesse. He just makes everything bigger in a positive archetypal way. And the trope in astrology is there's no such thing as a bad Jupiter transit, except that Jupiter connecting with Pluto in April is the first moment where his largesseness, his wave of bigger energy is going to wave up against the planet of death, change and transformation. And we're seeing that right now as we move towards that transit that hits in the next 4 weeks. We're watching the acceleration of the virus on the planet, the increase of awareness of it and the response to it, but also the enormity of the whole kit and caboodle. So I'm looking at Jupiter's waving up of energy as a sort of a guidepost of how much is this going to accelerate? How big is this going to get? We'll know a little bit in the next 4 weeks because Jupiter's energy will give us that peak. Right. Now, he'll return because of retrograde and do it 2 more times during the rest of the year.
What are those dates? I'm very curious because you have been so spot on this year, Michael, that I am most curious as a prognosticator's prognosticator. How long or big could this wave go? Are we at, is this something that may... I can't even say the words fizzle out. It just doesn't feel like it's going to happen. However, from a positive perspective, is this something that's going to be a flash and be over quickly? Or as I'm perceiving it, and I think we've got a multi-year cycle in play here, a pre-CV world. So it could almost be like with the Aztecs, a pre-smallpox world and all of the indigenous peoples, and a that was post-smallpox, a post-CV world.
Listen, I can't speak into virology or epidemiology and things that I'm, but I do think we are in a pre-post consciousness of certainly how we work with the viruses. Certainly, we've seen a lot of these things rise up in the last, decades. And we have a history where big flus and other pandemics have wiped out enormous swaths of population. This isn't astrological. This is just how I perceive things. I would guess that we are more likely to see frequent experiences like this that are small but regular than, say, one big flu that wipes everybody out. Part of that's because our science has improved so much that because we know how to respond to such things, we can contain them more. But I don't think we're done with, pandemics. In terms of the immediate year, the 3 times that Jupiter is going to sort of wave things up are April, June, and November. So in the months of June and November, we're going to have a similar sort of rising up of energy that we're going to see in the next 4 weeks. So that's one way to answer the question. Isn't like, here's what's going to happen, but because how would I know? But I can say we're going to see a rising up in April, and between now and then the end of April, we'll have a lot of data about what to expect beyond April. And then just know that June and November are similar risings up of enormous energy. We can't, though, speak about the rest of the year and what might happen without also talking about Saturn dipping in to Aquarius and back, because that could, like the Jupiter piece means we're moving well, we know what we're doing, we're beneficently, attending to everything, and things go well because that's what Jupiter brings. But at the same time, Saturn, the reckoning planet, he's going to move into into Aquarius in a few days. He'll backtrack out of it, and he'll do this a couple of times during the year. So he's only dipping in, and then he'll backtrack into Capricorn. But Aquarius rules the global community. Aquarius invented one world in a kind of collective experience. So that's something to look at astrologically. Well, how is that going to impact us? And that happens in like the 3rd week in March of 2020. And so we'll have April then becomes an even more interesting month to reckon what we can expect beyond April. But I certainly can't tell you what that's going to look like because we haven't gotten to April yet.
Makes sense. You keep using the word reckoning. And when we talked last time, we talked about things that were hidden under the carpet, current systems, status quo, not necessarily cats and dogs coming out of the sky and things like that. But of all of this, either we get to address it or it is going to be addressed. What can you tell me about this?
Well, I think we're seeing exactly that. Only, of course, we're watching the whole system respond to whether or not we're going to address this well or poorly or differently or better. So, I live in a bubble just like everybody else does. Like my Facebook bubble, my social media bubble tells me that the world is interested in astrology and everybody's interested in spiritual expansion. And, so I have to look at my, how I want to see the whole world,
Yes.
recognizing that I live in a bubble where a thing like this, a calamity like this, is being met with, how can I serve? How can I help? How can I deepen my consciousness? What do I need to do to meet this life on life's terms so that I might be a better steward of my humanity? But I also know that, the bulk of people are just simply freaking out. A calamity like this is like a grand projection test. In psychology, one of the ways we test people is there's ways of testing intelligence and rational mind thought and language formation. And then there's the projective test.
Collective Rorschach test.
Right. What is the Rorschach test but just shapes and movement possibilities, and then the looker says, well, I see a butterfly, I see a caterpillar, I see a this, I see a that. And the person, by the way, learning how to score a Rorschach test is like one of the most complicated things in all psychology assessment tools. It's very sophisticated, but it's designed to let the subject project their unconscious onto something neutral. The virus, the pandemic, is doing that as well. And so when people are freaking out at the grocery store and knocking over pregnant people to get that last bottle of water, or taking more toilet paper than their poor buttholes could possibly use in 6 months' time, it's because it's a projective test, and fear and anger and limiting response to is part of what's being shown to us because of the projective test of this, as is the best of us, the lightest of us, the most care and concern that lives in us is also projectable. So everybody gets to learn who they are by virtue of how they're responding to this moment.
Thank you. It reminds me of Dr. Wayne Dyer saying, you squeeze a lemon, what comes out? We're finding out what's on the inside. Or I like to think of money as an amplifier. And I say, is money good or bad? And I say, well, money's an amplifier. If you come into money and you're miserable, you're going to be even more miserable.
More miserable, yeah.
You come in and you're a happy guy, you're going to be even more happy, giving a lot of it away and having it cycle around. So this sounds like the virus, which, as you're saying, is in a sense, and if we go back to 1520, although it wasn't so good immediately, but the virus is an evolutionary change maker and amplifier, helping us to evolve.
Yes, and this is why I love astrology, Michael, because it leaves nothing out. The astrology does not declare that a virus is good or bad, only that it is an aspect of the collective. Astrology does not declare that a particular president of the United States should or shouldn't be in office. There's no Democratic Party or Republican Party in astrology. That's why I love it.
Is astrology a setup for consciousness, for expansion, for growth?
Well, a little bit like money. It's an amplifier, right? So if you are in alignment with the idea of changing how you're thinking and how you're perceiving so that you have a more graceful experience of your life, and you're down for healing wounds and diving into the basement to do that work, then astrology becomes a reflection of your willingness to go into the depths of you so that you can rise up powerfully, self-actualized, changed, and transformed. But by the same token, if you want to use astrology to see how bad it's going to get, you can do that too. It's like when I first spoke into this idea of, well, what's going to happen with the virus? I was like, well, how would I know? I wrote something where I don't even remember where I shared this in the world. It might have been in my daily Astro Alerts, where I said, I can spin a tale where this goes well and goes away fast, or I can spin a tale that says expands beyond reckoning. That's that Jupiter thing. Like, I don't know if Jupiter is going to make it go away fast because Jupiter brings good things. That's a subjective judgment that virus is bad and healing it is good. Now, I get it. I can hear all sorts of people railing against this idea right now, going, but if virus kills people, it's bad. It makes people sick. It's like, yeah, but you're missing how it works. Consciousness must include that which you would prefer is not here, because you cannot pray away or meditate away death, change, transformation, other people's free will, terrible things that happen that we have to navigate, right? Including viruses.
And we do not change, as a species at least, on the couch. I don't wish for discomfort to come, but the fact is, well, I can look to my own life and the 2x4s that I've gotten, leaving me with a bunch of titanium parts. Those were for my highest good because I wasn't listening or willing to hit that red button and stop and do the work. Not out of spite, but the changes either come an easy way or a hard way. And if we're on the couch stuck in autopilot, universe gets our attention.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what's the opportunity? You know, the opportunity then is to know who you are by virtue of how you are responding. There's no wrong way to do this. There's no right way. It's like I've seen lots of posts of like, you know, write that novel, do that thing, study that language, you know, with all of this downtime that you have. And I like that. I appreciate that. I mean, I'm just working. Like I work and live at home. Nothing has changed for me except that I can't go to the gym, which I do every day. So that's a loss, right? So a lot of people facing a brand new way of spending time for a couple of weeks with all of this downtime. It's like, do this, do this, do this, do this. My favorite post was the one that said, don't write that novel. Don't do this or that. Don't learn the new language. Meaning, there's no right way to be with this.
Thank you. Dr. Amit Goswami, we had him on the show a few weeks ago, and he's always talking about his favorite song in the world, Doobie Doobie Doo. And it is a flipping back and forth between
doobie doobie do be. Doobie doobie doo. I love it.
That to me is where we get to be. If we've been in do mode, if we get in go mode, and the collective consciousness comes grinding to a halt, surf that wave. Come to a halt with it. If you feel in that time that it's time to click things back on, for myself, Michael, maybe for you as well, it is go time. Everything I've done has been leading up to now to try to help raise people's vibration and shift consciousness. Right. Now, then it is do time.
And in that crisis that happens like right before that doobie do, like do I be in this moment, there's the crisis of I must receive this event. I must see and be with life on light's terms. How you respond, like how you feel while you're sitting on the couch before you do or be, that's the metal. That's the work. Like that's where the opportunity is. So if you're conscious enough to be aware that your anger is up or that your fear is up or that your dread is up, then that's an opportunity to work with the shadow. Because again, it's a projective test. I'm not frightened by what's happening in the world right now, but not because I'm like better than other people. I'm not frightened because I've worked for decades and decades and decades to heal my inner traumas so that there isn't some big wound in here that's just waiting for the calamity to come around so that I can hang my discomfort on it. That's what's happening. It's like the squeezing the lemon juice. The people who are terrified and spreading fear, they were already afraid. The virus isn't making them afraid. The virus is giving them a projection screen to take the fear that lives in them and have it have its day. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a very human response. Like, hello?
Yeah.
That's being a human. But there's a gorgeous opportunity in that. But only if you're willing to refrain from that post or that thing that you might do that is, it feels soothing in the moment, you know, to sit down. I don't know what it feels like to write a post like that on Facebook because I don't write posts like that, but I read them all the time.
There's something I talk about called dopamine and ick. And when we are going to that place of fear of going, we're hardwired to look for the tiger and we go, there's the tiger. And we point out the tiger and we write about the tiger or we plunge into the news of the tiger. That's the dopamine response. That was designed to keep us alive as a species. However, if you peel one layer away, and this is why you and I don't go there, you will find that very quickly underneath the surface is a feeling of ick. That does not feel good. It's like eating a whole bunch of food that wasn't good for us, and afterwards we're like, oh, what did I do?
Yeah.
And you and I and everybody who's listening, we are light workers, we're light warriors. I challenge you to start looking for this ick. We get to become more awake and aware. What is the dance going on one layer beneath the surface?
That is exactly right. And that's the opportunity. And as more people on the planet do that work, the collective is impacted. So here's where the bubble that I live in doesn't trouble me, because I do understand that my message is not for everybody. I am not everybody's teacher. So I need to be living in the bubble and teaching in the bubble so that the people who I am the right teacher for will come in my direction. This is true for all of us teachers, yourself included, right? And then if all of us are doing that to the best extent that we're capable of navigating, then the collective is impacted.
Well, the bubbles make a difference and can have a domino effect, because it's why I'm doing all of these group meditations online every Saturday, every Sunday night right now, live on YouTube. I'm having everybody come together because there is no focused effort right now. This fear is everywhere, but it does not have a specific focus. If I can entrain, it's like all the lights in this room right now, they're diffuse. They're helping to work with a green screen without shadows. If I brought them all together and gave them a focus, we've got a laser beam. So your bubble, my bubble, group meditation, all of this is creating a laser beam where we can positively shift the collective into a much different direction.
Yes, that's right. And just like if I interact with somebody who has the virus and I make some contact and I touch my face in the 7,000 times a day that I touch my face, then that virus is very likely to jump into me. And then I got it. Same thing with love, same thing with, enthusiasm, same thing with, inspiration. And this is what I also love about the bubbles, about the social media bubbles, is that it doesn't matter whether you are being followed by hundreds of people or just 4 people who are watching you do your live, meditation chat in your living room. Every piece of energy and inspiration and upliftment counts, because it's all part of the collective. I really believe in this, that when more individuals on the planet are capitulating less to fear and more to willingness to navigate the treacherous path in between the bullets, then we can have some peace for humanity.
Excellent, excellent. And I want to dive into some hopeful things here, and maybe this is one. But I feel called, because I don't know if it just took place at the beginning of the year or if we are in this cycle now. You drew a comparison at the end of our talk last time between this year and Lehman Brothers in 2008, and I've got to go, holy tamale.
So that's Pluto. Pluto moved into Capricorn in 2008. And astrologers, like we were sort of anticipating an intense 2020, we were anticipating an intense shift when Pluto changed signs, which he does about every 20 years or so. So because Capricorn is the sign that invented social and governmental structures, and Pluto is the planet that brings death and therefore radical change and transformation. Once that transit happened and Pluto moved into Capricorn and brought with it clear evidence that the power and gravitas of Pluto's capacity to change things down to the level of death and rebirth was going to hit the most unshakable structures. Now, what happened after that is that the old guard structure makers said, oh, no, we're going to fix it. We're going to help. We're going to throw billions of dollars at it, right? So that's the old guard saying, no, we're not going to allow structures to change. And then you could just watch as more and more breakdown comes. So between 2008 and now, 12 years have passed. We've been literally watching the old guard try to rise up and the new world ripping it down. You see this in the Me Too movement. You see this in the civil rights movement. You see this in other movements as well, that there is just a demand for change of the old structures that started in earnest in 2008, that are hitting a wild sort of like course correction now. And then in about 5 years, Pluto will change signs again and move into Aquarius. And that's going to bring us to yet a whole other decade or two's worth of change and transformation. Probably my last Pluto sign ingress before I wave off my mortal coil.
Michael, I don't know how much we're going to be able to handle thinking about, oh my God, there's more coming.
There's hope built into that even though Pluto changes and destroys and takes old things down, Aquarius is the age that we have entered, and the hallmark of that age is that we come to global peace and harmony.
Yes.
That's the promise of the age of Aquarius, and we have 2,000 years to get it right.
Woohoo!
This speaks to that old spiritual community adage that like we incarnated at this time to help, which I got to tell you, years ago when I first heard that as a young man in my 20s and 30s, my eyes would roll 6 times in my head because it just seems so hooey and so like, oh, please. Except that I believe it firmly now. I really feel like I was built for this time, that I was prepared to be fully ready in my wisdom, my knowledge, my business, my capacity to help, and not for nothing, the presence of social media platforms through which we, people like you and I, can share our wisdom and help and be of service in that way. Like, to me, as someone who's lived a life wondering, well, what am I doing here? Why was I put on the planet? It's like, oh, I get it. I was put on the planet for now.
Absolutely. It's interesting. A minute ago, you mentioned change. And then I'm just outside Aspen, Colorado, and a cold front was supposed to come through today. And all of a sudden, they call it a voodoo wind around here. A voodoo wind came through, ushering in change. And I'm very Carl Jungian about this, or Jungian. I see it. I see it for what it is. That was a sign. That was a symbol. But I don't label that wind as good or bad. It is what I choose to make of it.
Change occurred.
Yes. Any other dates we should be concerned about either this year or in the next few years, as I'm not convinced this is just a 2020 flash in the pan. It seems more like 2022, 2023. This is a longer term event.
I think certainly as people who live in the United States of America, as you and I both do, I think that anything that's happening that's sort of being driven astrologically by Pluto's movement also has to take into consideration the Pluto return for the chart of the United States of America. So if you cast a chart for July 4th, 1776, Pluto is at 27 degrees of Capricorn. Pluto is in Capricorn now. In fact, I think he's at like 24 degrees of Capricorn at this moment, which means it's only a few more degrees before he is exactly where he was in 1776. If I think about, well, what does a return planet do? It kicks up all of its consciousness into our awareness before it resets. It's like as if to say, okay, I'm almost done with my first cycle. I've got to show you all the shadow. I got to show you all that's hidden. I got to show you everything that's in the underbelly of the consciousness of the United States. And so while things are heating up by transit now, by return, 2023 becomes a really powerful, energetic year for the United States, having an experience of really seeing who we are for who we are. What I think this speaks to is polarization. It is the hobgoblin of the United States of America. I think it's the hobgoblin of humanity is polarization, right? But our country was literally founded on polarization. If you know your history, Jefferson and Hamilton had this whole sort of argument about were we agrarian or were we a fiscal entity, and they, this agreement to put the Washington D.C. as the capital was with a capitulation for Jefferson, so that Hamilton could do his banking and finances for the country the way he wanted to. So from that moment, we were polarized. And what's happening when something like this hits us, like a pandemic? Polarization. Choosing sides. If we don't learn how to pull opposites together in integration, we're in trouble. And so that's the job, I think, of us who are on a spiritual path, who are willing to sit through the discomfort of, I'm in this experience and I wish it weren't happening. I'm so uncomfortable, but I'm willing to sit in it, be with it, and figure out who I am with it, through it, and as it, so that I can change my perception of how I'm seeing the world. And if, another billion people do that, we will change the planet in the direction of peace.
Just the only word that comes to mind is choice. Is we get to choose in this time what is coming next.
Yes. It's that I work with a lot of people who have cancer, and I have buried clients who have lost their battle with cancer. So I work with people on a fairly regular basis when they are facing something calamitous, difficult, and absolutely not preferred. So the question is always not, why did this happen to me, which is often the first question. Why did I get cancer? Wrong question. The question is always, now that this has occurred, who am I going to be? Who am I going to be in response to this calamity? We as a collective have rarely had to do this all at once. We do this in war, and we've never had that in the United States in our backyard. So this is in some ways outside of, say, the recession or the Great Depression or moments that I'm aware of that I have never lived through. Like, this is the biggest collective challenge, I think, that I have personally experienced. And at the end of the day, it is always about choosing how I'm going to see, perceive, and respond to what I'm being given. And I would add that there's another layer of that is that when in doubt, choose service. How can I help? How can I serve?
2 questions and then a quick guided meditation if you've got the time for it.
Oh, okay, sure.
Excellent. All right. First off, I see this as a time of a positive upgrade for humanity. Upgrades aren't easy. You're tearing apart the machine. You're putting in new cards, but that's how I see it. Do you see positives coming out of this and astrologically?
Well, I, of course, would have the same exact language as you do about all moments like this are opportunities for upgrade. So I live that, right? I live that. And so I live that. So I own that idea. Yeah. I don't own it and you don't. You know what I mean? Like
I'm okay giving you the trademark. I'm not sure what the rest of the world thinks, but I'm okay with that.
What I want to be careful of here is again, I don't want to answer the question in a way that leaves a listener feeling like they are failing at this if they are overwhelmed or more frightened than they wish they were, or anxious at a level that they think they oughtn't be. So I want to be really careful that I'm not saying, oh yes, if you're not feeling like I'm feeling, which is relaxed and sort of untouched by this and trusting that we're going to learn something magnificent about ourselves. Like, if that's not your experience, that you're like failing. And it's an opportunity to know who you are in relationship to that possibility. How far away, like this would be the question to ask as you're sitting on your couch, wondering like how you're going to navigate the rest of your life starting tomorrow, is, not only how do I relate to this change, but in the presence of the despair and the anxiety that you might be feeling in this moment, can you find the hope? I certainly believe that there is, and it's in the exact language that you just used, which is that there is this growth potential, this upgrade potential, that we really are changing consciousness as we go. I can only, though, speak about it abstractly, because if I look at it through the lens of my pedestrian hat, I got nothing for you. Like, I don't know how we're going to navigate. I don't know what happens next. But I trust consciousness. I trust self-actualization. I trust prayer. I trust meditation. I trust, banging on the pillow with a tennis racket every once in a while. You know what I mean? I trust the work.
Thank you. And I'm with you. And I'm not going to take away. I mean, concern about loved ones passing away, about getting sick. This is all real stuff. And so I'm not making light of that in any way, shape, or form. But we can still flip it back to the light and flip it back to the light and flip it back.
That is always the response we want to cultivate our willingness to do. Always to flip it back into the direction of what's the lesson? How can I transmute this? How can I be with this just difficult feeling and come out on the other side? And sometimes what I see happening online when I watch conversations go on with people who are sharing online, that sometimes the person holding the higher ground will say, well, here's a higher ground. And then the person who's on the other side will say, well, you don't know what it's like to be a waiter and have your livelihood closed down for 2 months. And it's like, yes, I get it. You're probably more frightened than you for good reason.
Yeah.
And it's still the same equation. How am I going to choose to be with this calamity? Though that person might really be suffering in a way that I can't understand, where that person will be fine. The answer is still the same. How am I going to be in relation to this new information about what the world on its own terms is offering?
Thank you. Any last words of wisdom? You may have just done it, but any last words of wisdom before we dive into a meditation? And this has been phenomenal, Michael.
This is what we were built to do. We are not shy of everything we need to rise up and meet everything that's happening with an open heart, a high level of consciousness, and a movement towards care for all.
Woohoo!
Woohoo!
Thank you. Would you mind, unless people are driving down the road, they can do this later, leading us in a short guided meditation, whatever you feel called to?
Sure. Let's do it. All right. So as we relax and take a deep breath and reset the moment and declare that this is a sacred time for turning within, find the space that you're in and deepen that connection. If you're sitting, sit more heavily in the chair. If your feet are making contact with the floor, feel that more viscerally within your own physical experience. And then follow my voice and understand that as I speak, I'm guiding us all into an imaginative trip into the inner being of us, the very center of our life, our body, right where our heart beats and our breath begins, that we start our journey into the collective from this individualized place. So I ask you to drop into the center of your breath and the center of your heart at this moment, recognizing that your throat opens to this openness as well, and your belly also joins this open-hearted space. We take another breath and we bring in the third eye and the sacral chakra so that our capacity to be intuitive and see further and our willingness to move through change and transformation and creativity is brought with us. With another breath, we include the root chakra, trusting and knowing that all needs are met, and the crown chakra, maintaining an open connection to the divine that is always flowing through us. So now as we have this individualized alignment right from the center of our hearts to the very edges of our consciousness and the energy that is your embodiment, I invite you to join me into a visit to the collective, that we enter through the streets right outside of wherever you are sitting, that your consciousness of light that emanates out of your heart through your body and 3 feet around your body expands even more till it fills up the room that you're in and spills out of the home that is where you dwell at this moment. And as this expanding light that begins at your heart spreads through the streets of where you are, it passes by everybody who is either sleeping in their beds, walking in their homes, playing their little Scrabble games and doing their little sequestering, that your energy matches and greets theirs, and that the moment this energy reaches any body of water that's near your geography, it immediately is enveloped into the earth herself. And so now we are connected to our hearts at the very center of our beating bodies and the earth herself. And in this imaginative collective space, I invite all of us to reach into places where viruses dwell. We don't even have to know what that means, but we follow the imaginative voice that says, I am now connected to my heart and in the space where viruses dwell, and we just bring coolness, light, spaciousness, healing. We don't say no, we simply say, more God here. And then we allow this idea to just drop onto us. We remind ourselves that at every moment we are this connected, both to the center of our beings at the level of our heartbeat and breath, to the edges of our energetic consciousness that connects to the energetic consciousness of every sentient being on the planet, that connects us energetically to the earth as a collective. And in that constant connection, center of our hearts to the collective whole, we can lift this vibration up and have an expanded shift of what is occurring. We ask it to slow down and to allow a more measured response to the changes and the shifts that are happening, so that we might lift the experience up more powerfully, more effectively, and bring healing for all. And so it is. Amen.
I particularly like the slowing down part so that we can integrate.
Yeah.
It feels like such an accelerated time.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you so much, Michael. This has been beautiful. This has been a treat. Thank you for joining me so quickly, because I just rang you up last week and said, Michael, it's all coming true.
Happy to be here. Thank you for asking.
I want to drive people to your daily astro alerts. What are your daily astro alerts? Where can people find them, Michael?
Daily astro alerts are an email that I write every day for the next day. So every morning I look at the astrology of the next day and I write a comprehensive report, anywhere between 200 and 800 words, depending on how much there is to talk about. It goes out 9 p.m. Pacific time for the next day. It's a way for people who are curious about astrology and how it underpins our day-to-day movement to do a couple of things. One is, if you know a little bit about astrology, it's a great way to stay in touch with really detailed, comprehensive descriptions of planetary movement day to day. But it's also a teaching tool. A lot of people get the astro alerts, and because it's all about astrology, for the first few weeks or even months, people read them and it's like, I don't quite understand this. But I am a teacher at heart. I promise you, anybody who reads these on a regular basis, you will learn astrology, because it's part of my intention is to teach through how I write. It's a paid subscription, so there is an investment. There's an exchange of $10 a month. And for that $10 a month, you get this email. I've been doing it for 6 years. They're very popular. I love doing them, and I love the response I get from people who are avid and committed readers.
And my guess is doing something like this, because I'm challenging all of my coaching clients, I'm challenging everybody at our boot camps to dive in on the inside, learn about yourself during this time.
That's right.
And my guess is that reading something like this, you are going to be, oh, wait, look at my chart. Look at what's going on here. Look at what's going on in my inside. Your awareness is going to be cranking up, and you'll be learning and growing.
Yeah. And it's for those people who do get the alerts and read them and then sort of plan how they're going to respond to their day. That's a consciousness upload. Like, if you know that there's an energetic transit that makes communication particularly difficult that day, and you read the article, you are more likely to be mindful of your communication as you go. That's just a simple, tiny little example of one way that tapping into, well, what's the planetary weather like, is a way of doing exactly this, of turning within and saying or asking, how do I relate to the energy that I'm being given on a particular day?
Very, very good. And what's the URL for people to go to?
Just go to michaellennox.com. That's my website. That's where you can find out about my classes, my free master classes. There's 1 or 2 of those. The daily astro alerts are there. Blog articles about the new moons, the full moons are all there. michaellennox.com.
So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get the daily astro alerts, and begin making powerful, positive choices today and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you so much, Michael.
We did it.
We did it.
We did it.
If you like this video, then you're a light worker, you're a light warrior, and we need your love and light. We need to crank it up to the max. That's why we're offering boot camps. You can check them out down below. Monday through Friday events, 1 hour a day, almost free, to help you crank your light up to the max, get you in the most positive place possible, boost your immune system to the max, and help you to help the world to shine bright. We're also offering YouTube live events every Saturday and Sunday during this time to help you overcome fear, overcome worry, overcome stress, and again, boost up your immune system. These tapping events, these boot camps, all involve group meditations where we come together, set group intention, help you help yourself, help your family, and help the entire world. You're a light worker. Your time is now, so come join us. Click below for these extra special events. I just had the most beautiful, powerful, positive talk with Dr. Michael Lennox on astrology and what in the world is going on today. To check out more astrological shows and inspirational shows, click here, subscribe below, click on the bell icon to be notified of our almost daily YouTube premieres and YouTube lives. Be sure to check out our boot camps below. Comment, give us a big thumbs up if you like this. Above all else, shine bright. Woohoo! Love you guys so much.